Have you ever wondered what's powering that massive container ship crawling across the ocean? Or what gives a semi-truck the grunt to haul 80,000 pounds up a steep mountain grade? Well, the answer is this incredible invention that's often overlooked, the diesel engine. So let's dive into the unseen workhorse that literally moves our modern world.
So here's what we've got on tap. We're going to start with just how vital these engines are. Then we'll uncover the secret to their totally unique spark-free ignition. From there, we'll watch the mechanics in motion, explore the tech that makes them so powerful, tackle the modern emissions challenge, and finally, we'll look at diesel's pretty surprising future.
Before we get into the nuts and bolts, it is almost impossible to overstate how important these engines are. We're not just talking about some cars and trucks here. No. We are talking about the absolute backbone of global industry, powering the ships, the trains, and the farm equipment that our entire economy truly relies on.
But here's the thing. All this incredible power comes from an engine that's missing something we all think is totally essential, a spark plug. So that leads us to the central mystery we're going to solve today. How on earth do you get an engine to fire to create a controlled explosion without a spark? The answer isn't some kind of magic trick. It's pure physics. It all lies in this fascinating principle that makes the diesel cycle fundamentally different from the gasoline engine that's probably in your car. And that principle is called compression ignition. Just forget the spark. A diesel engine works by squeezing air so incredibly hard that it becomes hot enough to ignite fuel all by itself. It literally uses raw, brute force pressure to create its own heat.
And this is such a cool contrast to a regular gasoline engine, right? Which uses what's called the Otto cycle. In your car, air and fuel get mixed together first, then compressed a little bit, and then a spark plug sets it off. A diesel engine flips that whole script. It compresses only air, and then only at the last possible second, it injects the fuel directly into that superheated air. The order is completely different.
And just look at how different that process is when you see the numbers. A gasoline engine might squeeze that air-fuel mix to about a 12-to-1 ratio. A diesel engine? It can squeeze that air to as much as 25-to-1. I mean, that is a massive difference, and it is the absolute key to this entire process.
So what happens when you squeeze air that much? It gets insanely hot. We're talking over 500 degrees Celsius. That's more than 900 degrees Fahrenheit. And that temperature is well above the point where diesel fuel just ignites on its own. So the moment fuel is sprayed into that cylinder, it doesn't need a spark. It just, boom, it explodes. And that's the big secret right there.
Okay, so we've got the physics down. But how do you actually turn that scientific principle into the raw rotational force that can move a giant ship? Well, that's where the mechanical genius of the four-stroke cycle comes into play.
Let's walk through this little four-stroke dance. First, you've got the intake stroke. The piston drops, and it sucks in nothing but fresh air. Second, the compression stroke. The valves slam shut, the piston rockets up, and it squeezes that air, creating all that intense heat we just talked about. Third, and this is the fun one, the power stroke. Right at the top, fuel is injected, it instantly ignites, and the massive explosion violently shoves that piston down. That's your power. And finally, the exhaust stroke. The piston comes back up, pushing all the spent gases out the door. It's a beautifully simple and seriously powerful cycle. Now, that basic principle is actually over a century old, but the modern diesel engine, it is a straight-up marvel of high technology. It's the modern innovations that have truly unleashed its incredible torque and efficiency. The heart of any modern diesel is, without a doubt, its fuel injection system. It all started with these simple mechanical pumps. They were reliable, but not very precise. Then came unit injectors, which gave us higher pressure, but were notoriously noisy. That's actually where the classic diesel clatter comes from. But today, the gold standard is the common rail system. And the pressures in a common rail system are they're mind-boggling. We're talking up to 36,000 pounds per square inch. I mean, that is an insane amount of pressure. It's what you need to blast the fuel into an already superpressurized cylinder and turn it into an ultra-fine mist to atomize it, so it burns instantly and completely. But the real magic of common rail isn't just the pressure, it's the electronic control. Instead of one big squirt of fuel, the computer can tell the injector to fire multiple times in a single power stroke. A tiny little pilot injection starts the burn smoothly to quiet things down. Then comes the main injection for power. And there's even a post-injection to help clean up emissions. It is incredibly sophisticated stuff. So, the other critical piece of tech, the turbocharger.
You see, diesel fuel is very energy dense, and to burn it all efficiently, you need a massive amount of air, way more than the engine could ever breathe in on its own. A turbo uses the engine's own exhaust gases to spin a turbine that crams extra air into the cylinders, unlocking a ton more power. And modern turbos are smart. A lot of them use something called a variable geometry turbocharger, or VGT. It's got these tiny movable vanes inside that can actually change the angle of the exhaust flow. So at low speeds, they create a narrow path to spin the turbo up really quickly, which cuts down on lag. Then at high speeds, they open up to allow for maximum airflow. It's really the best of both worlds.
Of course, we can't talk about diesel without talking about emissions. The very things that make a diesel engine so darn efficient, that super high temperature and pressure, well, they also create some pretty challenging byproducts that have to be managed with some really clever modern technology.
It all comes down to this fundamental trade-off. Those super high combustion temperatures are fantastic for efficiency, but they also cause nitrogen and oxygen in the air to combine, creating something called NOx. And because diesel fuel is so dense, if you don't burn it completely, you get particulate matter, which is basically soot.
So, to fight this, modern diesels use what I like to call a triad of after-treatment systems. First up, exhaust gas recirculation, or EGR. It sends a little bit of exhaust back into the engine to cool things down and reduce NOx. Second, the diesel particulate filter, or DPF, which is exactly what it sounds like, a physical trap that catches soot. And third, selective catalytic reduction, or SCR, which injects a fluid like AdBlue into the exhaust to chemically convert the rest of the NOx into harmless nitrogen and water.
So, with all this complexity, where does that leave the diesel engine? What's its future look like? Well, while its role in passenger cars might be changing, its story is far, far from over, mainly because it's so much more than just a car engine.
When you really put it all together and compare it to gasoline, the key differences just pop right out. You've got compression versus spark ignition, the higher energy density of the fuel, and this is the big one, that incredible torque at really low RPMs, plus way better thermal efficiency. That efficiency and low-end grunt is precisely why it's so perfect for heavy work. And that really brings us to why diesel isn't going away anytime soon. For heavy industry, we're talking the ships, trains, and tractors that feed and supply the entire world. It is simply irreplaceable right now. There's just no current battery technology that comes close to matching the sheer energy density you need to push a container ship across the Pacific Ocean. Plus, these engines are actually remarkably adaptable to different fuels. And what's really amazing is this isn't even a new idea. When Rudolf Diesel first showed off his engine at the World's Fair way back in 1893, it wasn't running on the kind of diesel we think of today. It was running on peanut oil. This just shows that the engine's DNA, from the very beginning, was built for fuel flexibility. And that leaves us with a really fascinating final thought. If the very first diesel engine proved it could run on a renewable biofuel over a century ago, what does that really mean for its future? Could the same basic engine that powers global freight today one day run on advanced carbon-neutral synthetic fuel?